So we're gonna have to do some fine tuning with the transmission. I think that's really what's holding the car back now. And like if I keep the revs up, powerful car. If you've been following along, 2 episodes ago, I covered how 3 things were nagging on the car driving it around. The first was a sticky throttle pedal. I addressed that in my last episode. However, I have not been able to debug it because the car has not been running. And that's because of the 2 other things that were nagging it. An improperly shifting transmission that seems to not want to go into 4th gear, but most importantly, were what I perceive to be bad fuel injectors or old fuel injectors. Way back when I first bought this car as a barn find, I had a lot of problems, went through 2 fuel pumps and a couple of filters to get the bad fuel through it. And I think even though I was able to get the car starting and running, it just never quite ran right. Consequently, I felt that new fuel injectors were in order for the car. So in this episode, I'm going to take you through a lot. First is rewiring the fuel injectors with new connectors, how to install the new fuel injectors, removing and replacing the throttle position sensor, removing and replacing the crank position sensor, cleaning the grounds on the rear of the engine, a vacuum line upgrade, and finally, the ignition amplifier replacements. So there's a lot of ground to cover. Let's get started. Right, in this first shot, I'm cleaning the fuel injectors with my steam cleaner, fuel injector rails. I figured since they were off of the car and I was waiting for the order of fuel injectors to come in, I'd clean them up, get rid of 40 years worth of grease. That's what I'm doing there. A couple of days later, the new injectors came. I decided to go new because rebuilding was going to take too long and there was always a risk that I'd still have to buy some new ones. So here I am unpacking the new fuel injectors provided by 928s or us, as well as these are the connectors. It's a new Bosch style connector and the seal that goes onto the wire. It's a much more robust connector than the original. So here's a shot of what I was up against. Very brittle connectors. And you see I have my crimping tools. So in this shot, take you through what I had to do 8 times, which is pull the brittle wiring cover. So here's a typical example of the 8 injector wirings I was up against. Very brittle, 40-year-old plastic shrouds. Completely lost their flexibility. I'm cutting off the plastic here with an X-Acto knife and cutting it back because the new seals will actually replace what these dried out covers are doing. So this shot here, in my right hand is a pin connector. I have a set of pin removers. I had hoped that I could use a pin pusher to be able to remove the pins from the old connectors and then just put them into the new ones and not have to splice anything. Unfortunately, that did not work out that way. These 40-year-old connectors, I just could not get. I went through probably 30 different sizes of pin pushers, and none of them worked to remove them from the old one. So finally, I cried uncle to trying a variety of sizes. I tried a variety of pin pushers. It just would not work. And now with the connector removed, now you can see there's a good shot of, well, it's a little blurry, but that plastic is not flexible anymore. So with the connector removed, there's a shot of the connectors in the bag that comes from 928s R Us. It's a new style connector and the boot seal that goes on first before you put the connector on. I have the new injectors in the ports just to make sure no dirt gets in. But here I am threading the seal on the cut wires, pulling it back far enough to give me room to repin each wire. Now there's 2 wires, and I learned through this that the injectors are agnostic in terms of which side is which. So here I'm cutting back damaged wire, leaving myself enough slack. Brown wire is the ground wire. The other wire is red with brown in it. Very confusing if your vision's not that good, and God forbid if you're colorblind. But there you see me pulling, making a pigtail, twisting them ever so slightly. And then just for safety, because these pins are so small, I put my magnetic tray underneath them to catch it, because I didn't want a small piece going into the engine somewhere. There's a shot of what the pins look like. I'm going to put a link in the bottom of the description. Faye Hadley, if you watch her videos, she does an excellent description. This is the same pliers she uses for this. This is a two-way thing. She describes it much better on how to repin. But basically, you put that in the one side of the plier, the crimper, and put your wire in the back side. And that specialized crimper bites down the wire properly and crimps it, makes it look like a professional job. And once you know what's in there, you push hard down on it. And then once that's done, you flip over the pliers, or these crimpers, and use the other cam. And there's a shot of what it should look like when it's on. Now that I've got both of those on, it's a matter of putting the new connector on. You got to make sure the orientation's right. As far as the pin going in, so it clips properly. Again, I learned that the injectors don't care which side's which on it. These are DC connectors, so it didn't matter. So I'm slowly installing these. Now what I don't show is how I put the covers onto the back side of the connectors, but I used a hairdryer to warm them up so that they stretch easier. So while all these parts were off, I cleaned the injection ports with the old injectors in so nothing would fall down into the ports. You can imagine there was 40 years of grime in here. And unfortunately, this should be a tell right here. I accidentally removed a vacuum line. And that should have been a clue right there I was going to have problems. So here I am using Nurse Nancy's hairdryer to heat up the rails, the clean fuel rails. And what that did is it expanded the receptacle. I found the injectors were too tight to put in. So by heating the female receptacle for the top of the injector, that expanded it. And here you'll see, once that's heated, it's hot enough, I'm using the blanket there, I was able to put in. So now it's just a matter of connecting all of the rewired injectors and putting them back into place. Slowly pressing down the rails back into the thing, and then reconnecting the ignition wires against it. So with the injectors in place and the air boxes and all sealed up, without doing anything else to the engine, I said, okay, let me give it a try. Did we figure you out? Huh? Okay. Okay, we'll take that. Now that sounds like a vacuum problem. Having worked on this 928 for nearly 3 years now, two things are even more critical than fuel and air. One of them being electrical grounds, and the other being no vacuum leaks. So when I went to restart the car, it was not running right, and I had heard, it wasn't the first time I've heard this with this car, it sounded like a vacuum leak. So you saw earlier, one of the hoses came loose. The hoses for the vacuum lines were brittle. I said, you know what, I'm just going to cut bait, and I'm going to order a vacuum kit upgrade, and at this point, now I'm doing a top-end refresh, but this was going to be a budget refresh, so that included the fuel injectors and the vacuum lines. However, what I was noting at this point was the tap wasn't really bouncing, and that's typically a sign of the crank position sensor not working. That's up for debate, but since it's so hard to get out, you hear the horror stories, I said, you know what, I'm going to just order that now and put that in as well. So another few days went by. Roger and Mercedes at 928s or us shipped out the vacuum kit they offer, a new throttle position sensor, gaskets for the intake tube, and the crank position sensor. So in order to do a vacuum refresh, I had to once again remove the air cleaner, the air boxes, and the intake runners. So here's a montage of what it takes to do that on a 928 S3. So the first order of business, I decided to replace the crank position sensor first. If you look up crank position sensor on the various 928 forums, you hear all kinds of horror stories. It's mounted on the back of the V. The crank position sensor looks like a rotor with a longer shaft to it. It fits down into the V of the back of the engine, right where the bell housing meets. As you can imagine, a part like that sitting in the engine bay and heat cycling for 40 years, maybe a little bit tough to get out. And because the top of this rotor-looking piece is injection molded plastic, people run into problems breaking. For once in my life, I was patient. I soaked the hell out of it with PB Blaster for a couple of days and then managed to get it out. So it's a very difficult area to get a good camera angle in. But what you're looking at are the two fuel injector dampers on both sides with the infamous U-shaped hose. And what I'm using is an elongated hex socket here, and ever so slightly trying to get that to work and get on there. You see it at the bottom corner there, and even soaking it was tight, but I got it. Look at how it smoked when I did it. All right, so now I'm backing off the nut, So that was half the battle. Now I'm sticking in, you see my magnetic, and I was able to loosen the thread, and I just had my magnet there because I didn't want to lose that bolt. And there it is, coming out. Now I was using my extra long forceps and just grabbing it from the top and slowly twisting it with these extra long forceps. It's very difficult to see, but you can see it's wiggling. And so here I am just using angled forceps now, elongated needle nose pliers. And I was able to grab a bite of it. Again, it's a rotor looking thing. You'll see it here in a minute. But I was able to grab it and just start twisting it and pulling and using the bottom of it. And there you go. You see it popped out. So I really, really lucked out on removing this piece. I have a feeling it was replaced at some point. But there you go. That's what it looks like in one piece. And then here's what I ran into. I was like, oh, thank God I replaced this, because the male side of the connector was completely shot, just brittle. Everything's brittle on this engine. So here I am removing the clip. It's holding the male and female connectors of the crank position sensor. These older style connectors, there's just not a great design, and they have improved upon it. You can see the exposed wiring there. It was a good time to replace this. Well, good news. I was able to get this out without an issue, other than the clearance. But she's out, and I'm wondering whether the connector, where am I? That literally disintegrated, and what was left of it was in the female part. So I don't know if that was causing it, but I'm glad I fixed it now while I got this apart. With the crank position sensor replaced, I moved on to replacing throttle position sensor on the front of the engine, because I noticed it has a similar connection, and that was loose as well. So I'm slowly threading this through the old one out, and I'm going to replace it with the new cable. There's a new one, and I'm inspecting it. The connectors are the same. And the same situation I ran into with the crank position sensor happened on the throttle position sensor. The connectors were brittle, and when I went to disconnect them, the old male part stuck into the female part of the old cable. So I had to work that through, and then I had to get the lock on. There I am trying to feed it through onto the bracket. That's what's known on the coolant bridge. There's a bracket there that holds the two. And this had been loose, so I wanted to make sure this was good going forward. Finally realized I needed some light on this. And once I had the silly metal bracket, locking bracket in place, then it would hold it much. So with that, it was time to move on to the vacuum line upgrade. When you order the vacuum upgrade kit from 928s R Us, this is what you get. You get instructions, coiled hose, and then a number of elbows as well as T's. And you're supposed to follow the directions and go to all the ports. So in the following montage, I'm going to show you how I went through everything, and you'll see me. It's sped up. But as I connect each part, I'm crossing it off on the diagram so that I've got my bases covered. So just for shits and giggles, I'm going to try to start it and see if that makes a difference. So after putting all the new vacuum lines in, the throttle position sensor, the crank position sensor, it still wouldn't start. I went down the rabbit hole of maybe it's the fuel injectors. Does it not have fuel? So I had to pull everything out again. I didn't have to pull the intake runners, but as you can see in this still shot, but I pulled the fuel injectors again. Now, what you can do is with these, there's a trick. The beauty of most cars since the 1950s is that they rely on 12-volt DC power. So there's a lot of tricks you can do to test electrical things. Not surprisingly, a couple of people on the Rentless forums recommend using a 9-volt battery to test the injectors. If you hear the solenoids clicking inside, you know they're good. Since these are brand new, there was a low probability they got gummed up. So you're about to see a test rig I came up with. So nothing more than a couple wires from an old multimeter I had. I took one of the old connectors, spliced those multimeter wires into it, and then just attached a 9-volt battery to it. Sorry it's out of the camera, but listen carefully. That clicking confirms that the injectors work. So I was satisfied, and I talked, and Roger at 928s or us talked me off the ledge. He assured me that not only were they brand new injectors, but they're tested before they leave his shop. So I had no reason to believe any of those brand new injectors for $325 were bad. Knowing that, I reinstalled them into the car, tried to start it again, and I confirmed at the lines that the car had plenty of fuel. I'm not going to show it, but also in the fuse box located in the passenger footwell, I jumpered the fuel pump relay to confirm that the fuel pump was running. You never know with these cars. Touching something might affect something else. But confirmed that was working fine and that I had fuel coming up to the front of the engine. Knowing that and having all the injectors back in, I was back to it's either spark or vacuum. Knowing that I double and triple checked all of my vacuum lines on the top of the engine, I decided to focus my attention on whether I had spark. Now on the S3 cars for 85 and 86, they have two separate distributors for each bank of cylinders. It's different from what you hear people call the twin dizzy. So knowing that the car has two distributors, two coils, I decided to pull the spark plugs from the number 8 and number 4 cylinder banks. That's the rearmost spark plug on either side of the V8. And here's what I got. So now I was getting somewhere. I confirmed that I had spark on the passenger side, but not the driver's side. After speaking again with Roger at 928s or us, he suggested cleaning up all the grounds. Unfortunately, I don't have a shot of that, but underneath both of the fuel dampers on the back side of the engine are brackets, and each of them hold grounds for the engine harness and the fuel injectors. So sure enough, those were just filthy, as was the rest of the valley of the engine. So I don't have video showing it. It's just too hard to film that angle. But I cleaned up the grounds, put them back in. So knowing I still had spark on one side of the engine but not the other, it was suggested I focus my attention on the amplifiers. Now these amplifiers are located, there's two ignition amplifiers for these cars that are mounted right next to the hood latch between the front bumper and the radiator mount. I went to pull these amplifiers off because what one troubleshooting trick you can do is change the amplifiers for either side, and then theoretically by switching them, if I suddenly had spark on the driver's side but not the passenger side, then I know I had a bad amplifier. Unfortunately, when I went to pull these apart, they're just two screws holding them on a metal plate. Not surprisingly, like all the other luck I've had pulling something electrical on this car, they split right before my eyes. And that's what you see here. In both amplifiers, the board that's mounted to a metal plate actually severed from the top half of the amplifier housing. So I kind of knew where this was going, and I tried to put them back together, but once I did that and switched them out, now I had no spark on either side of the engine. So knowing that both amplifiers were now bad, I had to order those. Called up Roger at 928s or us, got them on order. I ordered some will say you need the Bosch units. However, Roger is having trouble sourcing those now. He's found a supplier that is non-Bosch, but they have a 2-year warranty. And while they are much less expensive than sourcing a true Porsche part or even a Bosch replacement part at $125 each, that already added to a cost of what was already a project that's spiraling out of control. It was Thursday, April 25th by the time I had troubleshooted the fact I have 2 bad amplifiers now. And so I went ahead and ordered them from 928s R Us, even paying the premium for getting it shipped. So I would have it the following day on the 26th. That would give me time, hopefully enough time to get the car debugged and hopefully drive it to Carlisle for the Porsche only swap meet that was happening on Saturday the 27th. Unfortunately, our U.S. Postal Service is going through a major reorganization, and we're starting to see the effects of that. All I'm going to say, but suffice it to say, their website kept saying it'll be delivered on Saturday. So I wanted to get it on Friday. That didn't happen. The U.S. Postal Service's website kept saying I would get it by 6 o'clock on Saturday. So it's kind of too late at that point. And unfortunately, the parts never came until about 2 o'clock on Monday, the 29th. Moving forward, I just have to bite the bullet and you rely on UPS because I'm having zero luck getting parts from the U.S. Postal Service anymore. Pay too much money for not on-time service, and I refuse to do that. This is the first time I had ever replaced these amplifiers, and they rely on what's known as a heat sink material that you need to put between the amplifier and the metal ground block. Now, I did not know that the sensors Roger were providing each came with a small packet of this dielectric material. So I ordered some from Amazon. Here's what the assembly looks like. Packages came in. There's the MX4 thermal paste. And I also got some pieces for the ignition wires. But there's one of the sensors, and there's the paste that came with it that I didn't realize came with it. So I unpacked both of those. And then it was just a matter of 2 screws to loosen them up. And then it wouldn't be a Porsche without some sort of silly metal bracket you have to remove. And I used my pick tool to get that off, being very careful not to lose it. And those just snap out. And I removed the old broken board. So with both old amplifiers out, I set about cleaning that ground board so I had a nice surface. So first I used some cleaner, and then I used deoxit, get off the old heat sink paste. I had a nice clean surface, and then just for added measure, I used some isopropyl alcohol to rub it down one last time. Heat sink paste ready. It comes in its own syringe. You see me just putting it on there and splitting it between the two for both of those. And I used every bit of that paste in that small vial. All right, so with the paste on, just a matter of inserting the plugs, putting the metal clips back onto the connectors. They just lock down with Phillips head screws, and it's a matter of putting the plastic cover on. All right, so with those back in place, it was time for me to start the engine. Try starting the engine again, see if I had resolved the problem. Good news is it's running. Starts right up. Sounds great. But as you can see, I have the air cleaner off. So the minute I touch, well, that's not going to do it for me. And then it kills. So something's going on with this injector. All right. So what I found was, so now I started right up, idled nicely, sounded great. And even on that first little pass, I didn't smell the rich fuel smell like I used to with the old injectors. So it was looking really promising. Once I figured out the number, I believe that's the number 8 cylinder, the wiring was loose. I took that apart, tightened the pin again, and put it back into the connector, made sure everything was okay. It was the loose ground wire on that one. It was just not in the wire was not fully seated into the pin. So luckily I was able to save the pin, crimp it a little bit more, and put everything back together and put it back in, and the car started, and I was able to take it on a shakedown cruise, which is what you're about to see. So we're going to have to do some fine-tuning with the transmission. I think that's really what's holding the car back now. Probably still that linkage on the arm, but I feel like if I keep the revs up, powerful car. So, was able to take a shakedown cruise with it, did a nice 20-mile run with it along the Delaware River, but the car is shifting hard, drag racing hard, and it's not shifting into fourth gear, I noticed. So that was a problem I noted before I started down this rabbit hole. I've already put out my feelers out on Renlist, so that could be one of a couple of things going on. More than likely, with all my vacuum line changes, I probably have a leak from the bell housing. There's a line that runs from the bell housing all the way back to the transmission. I guess it's a servo of some sort. And people are saying that's probably, I've got a leak there somewhere. The problem with that line is it's above the torque tube. So in order to get to it, it's just, I would have to drop the exhaust, do a bunch of other things. With a variety of things going on right now, I just wanted to walk away from the car for a little while. So at least now the engine's running great, starts up nicely, no longer smells rich. So I'm sure my fuel economy will be much better. But now I need to focus my attention on the transmission and getting that to run smoother. Hopefully it's just a vacuum line leak, hopefully more towards the bell housing end and not something down the line. At worst case, I may have to replace the actuator. Again, that's another pain in the ass because it looks like I got to drop the exhaust system to gain access to that on the transmission. So that'll be a future episode. But for now, at least I can move the car in and out. I can drive it. It's not very pleasant with the hard shifting, but it's definitely more powerful. Unfortunately, what should have been a week ended up taking the better part of April, mainly as I was waiting, trying to piecemeal together what parts. My advice is if you're going to do an intake refresh, don't piecemeal it like I did. Buy all the parts like everybody else does and go through it's a good winter project. Start it in the fall, send everything out for repainting or refinishing, whatever you want to do for the air boxes and the intake runners. and get all the parts you need at one point so you have everything available. Those are the main lessons learned this time around. That's the latest and greatest on Project Risky Business. So if you managed to watch all of this video, I appreciate that, and you found it useful. So I would encourage you at a minimum to press the like button and comment, as that helps the algorithm on YouTube get this out to more people. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. As I finish this, I'm just under 2,200 subscribers. We're adding about 200 a month. I'm very proud of that. And coming Monday, June 3rd, is our new weekly Guys with Their Rides podcast. So between my garage vlog, the podcast, and the variety of auction cars that are coming online, I think you'll find I have a lot of great content on guyswithrides.com. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Thanks for watching this video. Please press the like and subscribe button, comment below, and be sure to check out our other videos on this subject, as well as all of the great content on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, you can call me at the number listed below, or be sure to check out our main website, guyswithrides.com.